You have any idea what Pro V1 stands for? What do you think it stands for? Post your comment.
The V is veneer.
Yeah.
It's veneer.
Don't say it. What is up, everybody? How you living? After Thanksgiving, no putts given. Here we are, plentifully filled. Maybe some tryptophan, maybe a couple naps in there. Tony, you get some good naps in last weekend?
Didn't really. I could use one now, though. I know that works.
Well, you just lay down. I'll take it from here.
Perfect.
So, conforming list stuff. We got a couple things popping up on conforming list. Again, what that means is that we expect these pieces of equipment to be put in play here relatively quickly because they have to be approved by the USGA ruling body in order to be played in a tournament. So this is the time we're seeing some of that coming up. New irons from Bridgestone. Yeah, that's in there. I have a couple Japanese iron things I'd like to show you here, Tony, as well. A couple props to whet the appetite, if you will.
I do like a good prop.
Nothing like a good prop. And history of the Titleist Pro V1. I had an article last week I want to dive into a little bit too because that's so exciting. But before we get into all of that, just checking out my social feeds here. Tony Finau's a late WD from the Hero World Challenge. Rumor is maybe going to live. Big deal, little deal.
So
don't
much
care deal.
Yeah,
Move on.
I mean, I don't care. I'm not watching it anyway. So, but it just feels like so much is in flux with the PGA Tour and LIV, and frameworks for agreements becoming actual agreements. Maybe not concepts of a plan. All of the things. And so, you don't even know, if somebody going to LIV, is it even a thing that matters anymore?
Right.
Yeah.
To me, it's interesting news, but not big news. Interesting in that Tony Finau's a name, a bigger name, not necessarily in an image of any sort of, very likable guy, right? By so many accounts and all of that. So it's interesting. To me, it's not big news because, like I said, we don't really know what this means. In the context a year ago with, Rahm, Trail Hatton, and stuff like that, we had a sense of what it kind of could mean, this idea of, defecting and whatever. But right now, we really don't have any idea what this move, if there's any consequence to it. It's a rumor. So it's interesting to me, but it's not a big deal.
Nothing
A bigger deal, I'll have you know, is what hit the conforming list. I think that's a bigger deal. So two new drivers really to talk about today. Ping.
2 times 3 or 4, depending.
Two companies, multiple models. Where do you want to start? Which one do you want to start with, Tony?
I typically start in alphabetical order that way.
Okay. So
no bias. I'm just going by the alphabet.
All right. So Callaway before Ping. Elite, E-L-Y-T-E. Elite. What in the world of unconventional smelling is going on here?
Yeah, I'm sure it's a nod to Callaway founder Ely Callaway. That's your E-L-Y, but I just feel like Callaway tries too hard with the names. Because here's the thing. There's going to be a healthy percentage, maybe even a majority of golfers who are going to see this on the shelf, never hear the backstory, never make the association, have no idea who Ely Callaway is because, that was a long-ass time ago. So, what's in a name? Who cares ultimately? But like I said, it just feels like a little too much effort being put into this because, we have an alphabet. We use those letters contained within to form words. Everybody, for the most part, agrees on how those need to come together to form those words, and Callaway, dare I say, goes rogue.
Okay. Hey now. Think fast, go rogue.
Which they actually spelled. Normal, so.
Here's my thing with the names. I don't care. I don't. Of all the things that people buy equipment for or the reasons behind that, I don't know that a name really comes up in so much as it becomes something that people associate with perform, like, oh man, yeah, I had a 983K, like that means something. Oh, I had the first generation Paradigm or something, or whatever the case is. It's, I mean, it's something. It's different, I guess, and maybe
A little bit of a Kelly Bundy situation, right? The new Elite.
Elite. It clearly gives us something to talk about. So
Gibberish. We're not saying anything.
Beyond that, USGA doesn't give us a lot to play with in terms of the photos or language describing said photos. But what can we tell? Like, okay, different name, got it. Beyond that, what do you see?
So it looks like this year they're going to do away with the max nomenclature and just kind of stick to a suffix-less elite or elite. So that's interesting to me if I want to kind of, speaking of overthinking things, right? Like, is just simply like, hey, why call it a max if we don't have to? Or is this a case of, as more and more companies have chased that 10K number and kind of started to associate that with max more and more, Callaway has not traditionally been a brand that chases that high MOI number. A lot of times they don't even like to talk about it because on paper it's not competitive. But again, we've talked about different ways to achieve forgiveness, different ways to ultimately achieve the desirable result above and beyond just pushing a big MOI number. So maybe that's why they got rid of Max, or like I said, maybe they're just like, let's just focus on Elite, and kind of the one without a name is the one for everybody.
Yeah, I wonder too if, again, to the degree that people associate certain things with words, we'll see later, the Max Fast model, whatever, does Max tend to mean, golfers see that and go, oh my gosh, they're giving me a lot of something, and if I need a lot of something, I'm not as good. Max forgiveness, max AB, like, I need jeans with maximum stretch,
max waist.
Like, do people associate that though as like max, in that sense, maybe being a bad thing? Again, I'm just guessing. I don't know. I don't have anything, data or information to support that, but I'm wondering if that standard buyer, because that mainline model, the one that's down the middle, is trying to serve the needs of the majority of golfers, and maybe you don't want to turn off the majority of people you think you're going to be buying that product by telling them they need a max waistband.
And I mean, to an extent, right? Like, we can talk about this a little bit when we get into the X model too. Man, I still feel that in some cases, Callaway is still trying to throw noodles and figure out what's resonating. So last year was a big thing. Like, this is the Max D. This is our draw model. Right, we're gonna put it right in the name, and now
tell people what it is.
Now this year, like, nope, no D, no Max Draw this time. We're gonna go back to the X, which was the draw model in the Paradigm, the original, the first Paradigm before they got all smoky 8-eyed. So I don't know necessarily. I think Callaway may be still trying to figure some stuff out with names that resonate and people understand. Maybe.
Triple Diamond seems to be one that hasn't deviated.
Yeah, Triple Diamond still Triple Diamond. Although it is listed on the conforming list as the Elite TD. But yeah, this is our Triple Diamond. So this is going to be, you figure, lower flight, lower trajectory, presumably more of a fade bias, better players, maybe slightly more compact profile. That's always tough to tell because the USGA photos aren't always to scale. So there's always some guesswork there. But that's traditionally what it's been. Same front to back weighting. Jumping back to the standard model, it's worth kind of mentioning very quickly that they've updated the weight system a little bit. So instead of that continuous track, they've gone to 3 discrete locations. Still fade, neutral, and draw, but you're kind of like, you're just picking one rather than the option to kind of slide somewhere in between, which probably makes sense because I don't think those in between positions get a lot of use. And if you can save some structure and get better performance by just saying, hey, it goes here, here, or here, and nowhere in between, that may be better.
Yeah, we see that on the Elite X too, right?
Yeah.
Where there's a neutral and a draw. There's no, fade type location, which would make sense. But again, discrete weight positions, you can't be moderately draw. But again, if people weren't using those, or they have testing information to show that, hey, yeah, we could save some weight by not having a continuous track, move the weight from one spot to another. It seems reasonable, I guess.
Yeah.
What's the max fast? Talk me
I mean,
this.
so that's if it is what it was last year, and no reason to think different. It's basically just what is now the X with some weight taken out of the head. So this is going to be speed through weight reduction. And I think, big picture here, you could make a case that certainly within the driver category there are divergent factions within the industry.
Sure.
And Callaway seems to be on what I would call the Titleist side of things, which is basically like, hey, we're gonna give you, we're not gonna chase MOI, we're gonna kind of tilt a little towards the ball speed side of the equation. We're not giving you an unforgiving driver necessarily. We're just not gonna we're not gonna chase a number, and then we're gonna lean heavily into speed through reduced weight. Ping does that, but they don't necessarily publicize it as much with the HL.
They don't lean into it that same way.
So,
for sure.
If you want to kind of split up and go, hey, who goes where? This is more Titleist-like in the approach, I think.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. You make note of a couple things. Say, okay, this raises a couple questions for me. The first one that it raised for me is, or kind of an association, the max fast. It makes me think of Eli Manning as Chad when he was trying out as the walk-on for Penn State, and they had that, and he's like, fast Chad fast. I don't know why. It just made me think of that. So it's the Chad fast or something. But question, is AI played out? Have we reached a saturation point of AI-ness?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. So the reason to bring it up is one of the markings, you won't see it in the photos, but markings indicated by the USGA notes is that on the face, Callaway has stamped in AI 10X. Or AI 10X faces. So whatever that means. Again, AI 10 times over, exponential AI here, but kind of go back, AI has been a long-running story for Callaway. They kind of positioned themselves as the leaders in that space for the golf industry, and they very well may be. They may continue to be to this day, but at the same time, whether it's publicized or not, every other golf company is using AI and machine learning. We've heard about it, Titleist and Cobra and TaylorMade. All the big guys for sure are doing it. And the other piece is it's just become such a part of life within the last couple of years. We talk about tools like ChatGPT and Grok, and the list grows and grows and grows. And just about everything in your life now uses some aspect of AI. And so you start to wonder, is that really a story that's going to matter to anybody, or is it time for Callaway to kind of move on? They've had a good run with it. Sure. But I just don't know. And to be sure, right, the stuff we looked at last year when we were out there and how they're using it to really define performance buckets, and I'm sure this will continue to be part of the story. Yeah. But it's not inherently unique anymore. And with that, it's not, to me anyway, a real differentiator. And so, if the entirety of the story is going to be AI, I'm just not sure how close to a home run that is anymore.
Yeah. What I liked about last year was how they, like you said, they talked about those buckets, right? And they talked about, okay, if we can see real human swings and, thousands upon thousands of real human swings and figure out, okay, can we iterate around what actual golfers are doing? So if you tend to have these swing tendencies or characteristics, or biomechanical realities of how you move the club through space.
Fast swing speed, positive angle of attack, in to out, neutral face angle, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah. So what I want to hear from them, AI 40X, I don't care. I want to know, what does that actually do for me? What's the real tangible performance benefit? Or am I closer now to a driver that is really based on that kind of one-to-one idea of, there isn't one driver that's perfect for everybody, but there is a driver that's best for me? Does this help them get closer to defining what that is for every individual golfer? That's a question I'm going to be interested to try to understand a bit more about here in a couple weeks when we actually head out there. Let's talk ping, because P comes after C.
Alphabet.
In the exact opposite world of naming conventions, ping just adds numbers, as many do. So we're saying goodbye to 430.
Well,
and hello to
some of it,
440.
most of it.
Some of it, most of it.
Yeah.
Okay, give me the overview. What do we got? 430 gone, 440 appears to be up to bat.
Yeah, I mean, I think ping is steady. Ping doesn't there are a few surprises with ping, and so hey, guess what? We're gonna replace the 430 LST with the 440 LST, the 430 SFT with the 440 SFT, the Max with the 440. So yeah, I think pretty much as expected. And my I don't want to say understanding. I think you can call it a virtual certainty at this point that the 430 Max 10K will stay in the lineup. So you'll still have 4, and then who knows? Maybe does the 440 come around in the 10K in another year? Do they do 10K, something different? So and to me the big one here is, okay, so we got this 10K in the lineup. What does that mean for the Max? Do we keep that, push that? The standard Max, do we put that MOI into the 10K space, which they have been before with the 420, and then the distinction isn't necessarily high MOI, not quite as high MOI, but potentially like, hey, shape preference, if you will, and some of the tweaks to your bulge and roll that go along with that. Do they use it as an opportunity to maybe even take a little bit of MOI out and put some speed in? Because that's usually the trade-off.
Sure.
So
it'll be the most obvious trade-off.
Yeah. So I don't necessarily. I would. It's ping, so I think they'll probably try and squeeze a little bit more MOI out of it still. But again, with the 10K in the lineup, it creates an opportunity. And then the rest, right? LST is going to be, low spin, but probably the highest low spinning driver on the market.
Right.
SFT, I expect to just remain the absolute best in class for that anti-slice kind of player. Typically, they've managed to kind of nudge MOI up a little bit every year, which is, in this case, probably a good thing because, again, as we've talked about, when you go to a draw bias model with that weight in the heel, MOI tends to be not quite as high.
Right, tends to hurt MOI for sure because you're moving that center mass toward the heel, and obviously max MOI comes when you can get that thing as far back and low in the head, right, as possible.
Yeah, and the other piece here, and it's kind of along the same lines where we talk about creating opportunities, freedom, whatever you want, but very clear is that everything now is going to have that carbon crown.
So that carbon fly.
LST only last year, then they put it in the Max 10K. Now it's going to be everywhere. And again, saving weight, creating opportunities. Usually that opportunity is used to push weight low and back. We've all heard that story before, but that's typically what you do with it. It's not what you have to do with it. So you can, they could say, hey, let's really move some weight forward in the LST, right, and take more spin out of it. I don't think they would, but again,
maybe they put it all in the toe and make it a crazy fade bias.
Do whatever you want.
I don't think they'll do that, but that's the thing with discretionary weight is it's discretionary. If you save it from the crown, whether it's 4 grams or 40 grams, you can put that weight wherever you want to try and affect mass properties and by extension performance. I think one thing you said I think is really important that people maybe gloss over is like, and this is something that I really like about what Ping does, and some others might go, ooh, not 100% sold, but their LST is like I said, a higher spinning, low spin model. So for people that have just chased, low spin at all costs, and we kind of saw this last year too. I think when Callaway later came out with the Triple Diamond Max, right, where it was kind of like, hey, we're gonna kind of get you somewhere in between those two, and that was really, really intriguing. That's kind of that area I see the LST in already, which is a moderate to high spinning, low spin model, which...
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to the original LST, right, the 410, I mean, that really is, if you want to, we're going on, it's got to be not quite 10 years, but we're,
feels like it.
Yeah, probably 6-8 years since that came out. And that really became kind of this benchmark driver for the industry. So much of what we see now, kind of that sweet spot is you can blanketly say low spin with forgiveness. Not necessarily, that's not necessarily real for everybody, but that kind of truly low, like not right on the neutral axis, but really low CG that is still rear-ish. Is that comfortable space where you're getting that low CG benefit, and you're not introducing a whole lot of spin by going too far back. And it's, we kind of look at some of the stuff that Callaway has done over the years. I always struggle to remember which one it was, but one of the epics, right, that was in that space that was just...
Epic Speed, Epic Flash, Epic. There's so many.
Like one of the most wanted winners. We're like, oh my God, this thing is just, And I remember talking to Alan Hocknell when he was with Callaway at the time. I was like, a little bit of a Ping LST type of thing. And it's like, yeah, it's fair. So, and again, like you see... you could point to almost every lineup, and maybe not a 1-for-1, but certainly fruit of the LST tree, if you will. So
if it were a coaching tree, the G400 LST might be Mike Shanahan, might be you can go back even further than that, Maybe you want to go back a little bit, but the West Coast offense, it all started with the G400 LST. Bill Walsh, maybe. Maybe we're going to call it the Bill Walsh.
There you go.
I don't know. Okay. Well, some things to watch for there. Scale of 1 to 10. How excited should I be for these Bridgestone irons? So, Bridgestone, as we know, maybe some of you want to go back like I did right away to the J33 combo set. One of my favorite combo sets of all time. Once upon a time, right, in a land far, far away, Bridgestone had at least some presence in the U.S. retail market with irons and wedges, even metalwoods. Then they kind of shifted away from that, right? Bridgestone had undergone a couple leadership changes as well, which we don't have to detail right now, but they kind of abandoned the club side and said, hey, we're going to focus on ball business. And now it kind of feels like we're dabbling.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is... Although there are 3 models, you talk about dabbling, dipping your toes in, it's like, it is just a toenail, the very tip of a toenail into the water, I think. But yeah, it's typically kind of where Bridgestone has been in the iron space anyway. But ultimately what I mean by these, you have 3 models. And they range from extremely better player-centric to a whole lot of better player-centric. Like there's no game improvement here. There's no player distance. It's just, I don't want to say run-of-the-mill because they're proper endo forgings, if you will. This is, made by one of the top factories in Japan. But yeah, I don't know that this is... It's interesting because it's Bridgestone and we haven't seen one in a while, but this is not an offering for the masses by any stretch. This is, let's gingerly dip our toes into it and kind of see what the response is.
So let me ask the question this way: what golfer is excited about this? So who is sitting there going, okay, like who is Bridgestone going after with this one? Who's the target buyer here? Do you think?
I think it's anybody who loves that, who wants that, that Japanese forged iron crowd, right? We know they exist. They're not. It's not.
Oh yeah.
It's not a huge number, but it's not zero. It's not going to be a huge moneymaker for them, but it does reestablish them as a club manufacturer. Maybe it's a gateway back to the metalwood space. We'll see where it takes us. But again, this is a better player who wants a Japanese forging and who maybe is a little bit of a nonconformist, doesn't want kind of the mainstream stuff. And you mentioned having that fondness for the J33, and there are a lot of guys out there who love that iron. And so there's going to be intrigue from guys who have played Bridgestone in the past as well. I just don't know that it's a huge number. It's definitely not a huge number.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's kind of for that JDM enthusiast, of which there are some of us out there, no doubt. People that care, right, about it's endo forged, and I've constantly been on Strixon's case to make a bigger deal of that with their irons, to discuss more of that, which hopefully they will. But for people that care, that's a big deal. For people that don't know or don't know the difference or whatever, okay, who cares? I think it's that person. I also think that it's a particularly smart play for them because they're not going to get into this huge performance war. Like
I mean, it's funny. Like, I'm looking at some of the specs here. Like, the groove pattern is inspired by tire tread on the wedges, so it's like wheelhouse. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to compete in that space, right, where, and again, we'll look at our testing. We'll talk about that. When we test, players' irons, things that tend to be either single piece forged or don't have massive amounts of multiple materials to boost ball speed and these type of things, we're not expecting crazy ball speed numbers, right? We're basically, to perform really well in that category, what you need is enough speed, so that you're not getting penalized, you're not a club shorter than everybody else, but you need enough speed to compete, and then it's consistency, it's accuracy, it's repeatability, and can I hit that same shot? It's consistency of spin and trajectory and launch and all those things. And can I do those over and over and over? And that recipe is something Bridgestone knows. I mean, I have to think that this isn't like a new area for them. So I don't see them really lacking in that area. And like you said, maybe providing something to somebody that's already pretty interested. Yeah, I mean, I look at these and I'm like, maybe you could argue with the CB Plus that you can make an exception, but this is largely what I would classify as no-tech irons.
Yeah.
Right? It's very traditional, classic, if you will. And so there's a player for that, but again, it's it's not going to shift the market.
No, and I don't think they're expecting it to. I am into a phase in my year where I'm going to be diving into more JDM irons and giving them some thoughts and feedback. Here's the one that's up to bat today, Tony. This is what we're going to lead off with. I don't know. Can you see that?
Oh, it's a 7.
It's a 7. This is a 5 iron from 7.
Damn it!
I know, right? Like, come on! So they're first up to bat. All of a little, we tried it coming out here in not super long, but there are a couple others. So I'm going to start with these. There are others, plenty others that are out there. So if this is a space you care about or are interested in, I would like all 17 of you to comment. The same people who probably read my Fairway Wood articles. You're out there. What people? I know you're out there. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. Moving on. Last topic, Tony. Let's talk about this. The Titleist Pro V1 celebrating its 25th
25 years of Pro
25
V1s.
years of existence. John Barba, is writing or wrote an article about this.
One of the latest in his History's Mysteries series.
Yes. And what jumped out to you when you kind of look through there? What Cliff Notes, or what really jumped out? What made a lasting impression on you about
the thing that kind of stands out, big picture, right? And there's a lot of like interesting nuggets and stories within stories in this article, and the thing that you always go back to is like the roadblock. Oftentimes the roadblock to innovation is the thinking that nobody would be interested in whatever the thing is, or that they're so set in their ways they won't adapt. So the thinking was right at the time. Well, Titleist was kicking the tires on this for, this wasn't like one morning they woke up and were like, let's do this. Kicking the tires on what this would look like, but the thinking was like no tour player would play a solid core golf ball. And that granted, at the time, right, the solid cores were two-piece pinnacle type things that didn't really, do anything but go a long way. They didn't feel good. They didn't spin on a comparative basis. And so kind of, if that's your mindset, like nobody's going to play this thing, and you just got to get to a place. And again, this is all broad stroke innovation stuff, but you got to get yourself to a place where you can figure out how to think beyond the thing that you have.
Right.
So what if we put a soft cover on it?
What if?
And then maybe
all these hypotheticals, right? Like, to me, and I taught history in middle school and high school and that stuff, and like something that I always come back to is like, it didn't have to happen, and so you always think about at some point in time with whatever momentous event, at some point in time that thing didn't exist, right? And then at some point in time that thing did exist. And to me, it's really fascinating to study and try to understand the context around then why did it come to exist, particularly when there are things like this where you said it kind of negated a way of thinking of something that could never happen, right? Like, kind of reminds me of my like middle school math teachers, like, you'll never have a calculator in your pocket, kind of stuff. Like, well, kind of do now, kind of everybody and their mom, but these type of things that are really paradigm shifts within the industry, and it didn't have to happen, but it did. Like that's kind of wild. And the reality is, once that happened 25 years ago, nobody's caught Titleist since then.
Yeah.
It's
not like this is not exactly a true underdog story to begin with. We talked about this, like, hey, the clear number one ball brand in golf came out with a solid core tour ball, and now they're still the number one ball brand in golf. So really kind of a richest to richest story, if you will.
Well, to me, yes, except for the fact that, like, you look at that and you're absolutely right. I mean, when Titleist came out with the PROV1, it was already the market leader, like you said. They had a very healthy, safe, enjoyable market position that any ball company would have gladly traded them for, right, at that time, which in some senses that to me is more risk, right, where it's like, okay, we're already doing how dumb are we going to look if we trade this and we go this direction, and this direction turns out to be the .com bubble? We put all our stock in Enron, and what happens if the PROV1 was Enron, right? There's a risk in that, and there were plenty of people inside Titleist walls and sort of that were vehemently opposed to going this route, like kicking and screaming, right? Like, absolutely not. Why would we take what's good and profitable and everything's great? Why would we upset that apple cart to go down this road that we think might be better?
That part's wild, right? Like I said, it's that innovation kind of sometimes requires a kick in the pants, and it's, here we are. We have the luxury of it being 25 years later, and can kind of chart, kind of rewind, if you will, and see everything that happened along the way. But as obvious as a solid core ball with a urethane cover seems right now, like, why would you not do it this way? Like you said, right? They had the biggest Balata business in the game, and so it's like, first, like, should we even do this? Then how much of our production can we shift? And then kind of that almost the terminal decision, if you will, is like, do we really just shut this Balata thing down entirely? And because it came to the point where they had to go all in on solid core balls, if for no other reason than capacity.
And two masters,
and they really has no looking back. Like, as we kind of, last year when kind of the whole rollback situation was brand new, we were talking to Titleist and was like, hey, can you guys make us some Balatas? Do you still have, because nobody's making them. The shelf life on those is limited. I've said this before, but if you have Balata now, they're garbage. They're useless. They don't perform. They're lighter. They're smaller. They've shrunk. They're dilapidated, et cetera, et cetera. So they're no good. And so we were like, well, rather than buying what we know are going to be bad golf balls off eBay, could you guys just, make us some? You still have that stuff? And they're like, well, we probably still maybe have the machines, but we haven't made a single Balata in forever. So it really was like, it's shut it down completely.
Yeah.
And convert.
Yeah.
And I mean, look, you kind of see what's happened since, and it was obviously like nobody is sitting there at Titleist going, we really should have stuck with Balata. I don't know that this solid core thing is gonna pan out in the long run. So I'm sure that stuff is long gone, but crazy to think that it wasn't obvious.
No, and the other thing that I take from it, and if you haven't read the article, you should absolutely go read it, because there's a lot more detail in there than we can provide right now. But the other thing that kind of jumped out to me is that, we've seen massive equipment innovations. If you say, hey, what are the big, 5 biggest, 10 biggest, whatever, equipment innovations in the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, whatever you want to use, it's hard to come up with anything else that has been so associated and isolated to one brand. You can talk about cast irons. You can talk about, obviously cavity back perimeter weighted irons. Ping brought that, but other companies were able to capitalize on that, right? Take graphite or carbon, composite shafts. Well, that wasn't the purview of just one company, and we see that play out in the marketplace today. That there's a lot of balance, if you will, kind of between multiple leading brands. Fujikura and Mitsubishi are kind of 1 and 2. With the golf ball, since this happened, and those kind of those 90 days following, within a year, they established a level of dominance in the golf ball arena that has lasted 25 years. And if we're being honest, any golf ball company not named Titleist would be happy to be second, because that would be a huge market share. They want to be first. I get all these things. But the reality is Titleist has a lead that is so far still to date, and that, imagine jumping out to a race, sprinting the first 90 days, and then 25 years later, so 100 times that first 90 days or whatever, you're still way out ahead. That's pretty remarkable, I think.
Yeah, they do all right. with the golf ball. They sell a couple here and there.
Yeah, it's crazy. So
yeah, it'll be. And there'll be lots of stories too, as you can imagine, coming out of this. Titleist wants to make a big deal out of 25 years of Pro V1. 0 years of Pro V1 or Pro V2. Still waiting on the V2. Haven't managed to get it there. Keep working.
Yeah. And if you don't know what Pro V1 stands for, read the article. It's all in there. It's all in there. If you have questions, comments, things, find us follow us, ask us questions, all those good things. Until next time, we out.